I heard about this group from a guy named Tom Cole. How many of you know or remember Tom Cole? Any of you? Okay, a few of you. I was thinking about this on my drive in, which kind of messed with me because I had this, what I thought would be a great talk on business and the ups and downs of running a business and all this kind of stuff. I was going to share my favorite Bible verse, or one of them, which is John 13:7. And it's when Jesus is washing Peter's feet. And he looks at Peter and says, "You may not understand what I'm doing, but later you will." And for me, that's kind of been my journey of, I don't know what you're doing, but maybe later I'll understand it. And I had this awesome stuff, and it was all business-minded. And then I thought about how I got connected here through Tom. And one of the things that I loved about Tom was how he listened to Jesus really well. For those of you that knew him, he was always seeking counsel from the Lord. So on my drive in, I had 40 minutes, and I was like, gosh, maybe I should just change this completely. So that's what I did. So I have no idea where this is going to land, but I was jotting notes down. Jamie even saw me quickly writing notes down before this, and he thought I was working. I was not. But this overarching theme of Jesus wants to talk to you is something that I do feel like I can resonate with. You may or may not resonate with this Jesus wants to talk to you concept, but so often in life, I have treated prayer like a phone call. And I promise this is not going to be a sermon. We've got pastors for that and much better people. But Francis Chan talks about this quite a bit. He says, God is calling you to walk with him. Are you listening? So God is calling you to walk with him. Are you listening? This phone call concept of prayer, I think, is something that from the beginning of my childhood I can remember. You're going to bed, you eat a meal, whatever it is. You pick up the phone and call God and say, "Dear God." You thank him for stuff, you ask him for stuff, whatever your prayer life looks like, and then you hang up. And it's this one-way conversation with not tons of listening. And it's really an interesting concept when you think about it, because it's not really a conversation, which is how I think Jesus intended it to be. There's this character. Has anyone ever thought about who do you most aspire to be like in the Bible, other than Jesus? Or like you might have talked to your kids about that. I don't hear tons of people talk about Enoch. But in the Bible, Enoch is somebody that walks with God. How cool would it be if when people saw you, they thought, boy, he walks with God? That would be really cool. I don't exactly know what that even means or what it looks like, but I think it's a pretty cool concept to aspire to at the very least. One of the things that, so you heard some of my bio, but I grew up internationally most of my life. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was an executive in corporate America, and when I was 7, I started moving internationally. We moved to Japan when I was 7. We moved to Germany, Australia. We moved around the world. I changed schools 10 times in 11 years. So we were moving quite a bit, if you can imagine. I loved it. I think for people who grow up around here or grow up in like the suburbs of a city, they're like, that sounds terrible, changing schools, making friends. I really liked it. I think everyone else in those international situations is in very similar boats to you. So it's not as bad as it sounds like. But when my dad retired, we decided to move to Chicago because he had grandkids in the area. We moved to the Wheaton area, and I ended up at a Christian university in Indiana. And it was an interesting, how many of you have heard of Taylor University? Anybody? Oh, wow. That's like the most I've ever seen people have heard of Taylor. You guys are like really Christian. Like, yeah, you should. You definitely need Jesus. But, so I went to this Christian school that literally I never hear people that know of Taylor. And while I was there, I had the chance to start what ended up being a marketing company. Really what happened was a couple people and I got together, and we just started offering alumni free work. So it was, what do you want us to do? We just want to learn. And because we were young, everyone's like, you could do social media, or you could do search engine optimization, or can you build us a website? And we're like, we'll figure it out. And part of that journey was over the next 2 years while I was at school, that company grew really fast. My senior year, we were going to do well over $10 million. We had lots of clients. We had opened up 3 offices. We had 50-some people, and we were just growing like crazy. And it's this interesting concept.
What were you all doing in your senior year of college?
It's this interesting thing. I don't know if you've ever felt this. I might be totally alone here, but sometimes when things are going so well, it's easy to think God is blessing it because you're at the center of his will. When things are going so well, of course this is God who wants this to be going well. Of course we're following him bravely and diligently because he's blessing us. And worldly blessings equal close with Jesus. That's at least what I was going through at the time, which I think I've come to find out that might not be totally accurate. But it was this interesting journey. I had so many different mentors in my life that helped speak into me and helped keep me on a much better path than I think I would have gone down. And part of this started, do any of you read books, like business books? Okay, some of you. There's a book called Good to Great, which is by a guy named Jim Collins. And I read this when we were just starting our first company. And I really liked it. I liked it so much I did something that was really stupid. I went to their website, like the Jim Collins website, and just submitted a contact form and said, thank you so much. I'm trying to start a business. I hope I can use these concepts. Just super simple. 2 weeks later, I got a handwritten note back from Jim Collins saying, thank you so much for this. Contact me anytime. And was willing to start walking with me. And I realized, wow, this dude who I see on the stage is actually willing to talk to me. That's kind of crazy. So the next book I read, I wrote the author. And same exact thing happened. I just submitted a website contact form, and they emailed me back, not a handwritten note, but they emailed me back and said, reach out anytime. And I wasn't even looking to talk to these people, but God just kept putting people in my life to speak into what I was doing. And so I had all this great advice of what should we do, which was great. But I think I started replacing some of what I should have been hearing from God with what was awesome advice and counsel from really wise people who I respected. And there's nothing wrong with that second thing, as long as you don't replace what Jesus is actually talking to you. It's great to have both and not just rely totally on the other. One of my mentors during this time challenged me. We were giving them a bunch of money. It was a nonprofit dude in the nonprofit world who used to run a nonprofit called Compassion International. They do child sponsorship and all this stuff, and we were giving them a large lump sum of money. And he was sitting with me and said, what if you could figure out a way to stop giving us money and use your skills to serve the kingdom and help people? And I was kind of like, this dude is supposed to be taking my money. That's literally his job description, is to raise money from us. And we were giving a lot of money, into the 6 figures, and this dude is literally challenging us to stop giving money and use our skills to build a kingdom and help people. And it was this really interesting concept that I realized, like, I must not be hearing God right, because I'm thinking that all of this success is purely from God, and that if I just keep working my butt off, he's going to keep blessing it because I'm in the center of his will. But I've never actually thought about how would I serve him. It was always about what the next thing was that we were trying to conquer and do. This is, it's one of these interesting concepts, because I think so often the devil wants us to settle for something that's really, really, really good, but it's not the great thing that Jesus has in store for us. It might even, I think the devil's actually kind of okay with us kind of following Jesus, but thinking it's all us that the success comes from. I think he actually likes that, because it's this distorted view of a relationship with God. My first thought when he challenged me to serve the kingdom and help people was, I'm literally living what I always thought was like the American dream, the American like college story. Like we've all seen like the Facebook movie and all those. We were nowhere near that, but it felt like it at the time. It just felt like things couldn't go wrong and like it was going perfect. This is a really long story short, but ended up taking money from that company, leaving, and starting something totally different, which I'm not going to really go into, but you heard a little bit. Basically, we do marketing for a bunch of Fortune 500s, and we help nonprofits raise money. It's the easiest way to think about what we do. One of the things that I think I've realized is that when you start actually listening to Jesus, you feel three things, or you get three things. And this was something that was new to me. One was this peace that surpasses all understanding. Two was greater clarity. And three was better intimacy with Jesus. Our first company did well. So why would everything else we do not just work perfectly? That was my thought. And I started this second company with the thought of, we're going to impact millions of people, we're going to help all these awesome causes, we're going to give away a lot of money, all of that kind of stuff. And in our first 2 years, we've been in existence for more than a decade now. In our first 2 years, we lost 100% of the money I brought into the company, which it took major skill to lose that much money. It's unbelievable how fast you can lose money. It literally felt like some days we're just in Vegas and we're just putting it on one number and just like hoping for the best, and at the same time knowing this is never going to hit. I remember we hired this company with about a third of the money that I was bringing in to help us do some stuff. And from January till May, they were going to be building this software for us, is the best way to think about it. January till May. I had hired 25 people. We had started reaching out to different customers, all this kind of thing. And in October, this company goes bankrupt. We have no product. We've lost a third of the money. We have all these people on staff, and we have no business a year in, basically. And I'm like, wow. But one of the things that had changed from one of the things that had changed from the first time we were doing stuff to the second time, the first company, even though it's not true, I thought it was all me doing it. And really, I was talking a lot to God, but never listening to what Jesus wanted to tell me. In the second, and we never really had failure, which was the funny thing. So I didn't know what failure was until the second business. And you might think, boy, after you lose a third of your money, that might sound like a bad thing. But one of the things that had changed was I really started just asking Jesus, will you talk to me and just walk me through what you're doing? And at every step of the way, I felt this peace that surpasses all understanding. I felt extreme clarity, like we're supposed to do this, and it's okay if it doesn't work out because this is what Jesus wants us to do. And the third thing was I felt very intimate with Christ, which may or may not mean anything to you, but it meant something to me. Our second year of the company, we hired another company, and long story short, a little less than the second third of our money we put into this, and they couldn't do the job. It ended up just being a terrible project. And so we lost a bunch of money, and we hired the third company. So third time's the charm, thankfully. This company, how many of you have heard of the term ransomware? Some of you? Okay. So ransomware is when a company takes over all your stuff, owns it, and then basically blackmails you into buying it back, is the best way to think of it. That happened to us with this third company. So all of a sudden, we're in this massive thing where we're paying a lot of money to get access to something that wasn't even a company. We didn't even have a product, but we felt like this is what we're supposed to do. And you might think, boy, that is not the most fun journey. It didn't even dawn on me at the time how bad things were, probably because I was naive for sure. But I think also because I was just trying to talk to Jesus and take the next step and not worry so much about what are we trying to build and conquer like I was in the first company. It was this peace that surpasses all understanding. It was extreme clarity, and it was great intimacy with him, which in the end was a lot better than anything I was going to build anyways. There's this interesting tension that I think about very often. Many of you have probably heard when the religious leaders asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? Or what is the greatest law? And Jesus responded very simply with two things. It's in Matthew 22, 36 through 39. They asked him, what's the greatest law? And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. So that's greatest commandment number one. The greatest commandment, number 2, and keep in mind the greatest commandment in the law, the second is love your neighbor as yourself. And everyone in this room, regardless of where you're at spiritually, if you care about God, if you don't, has heard love your neighbor as yourself. And to me, it's an interesting concept because this is one of those places that I think the devil's sometimes okay with us settling for good and not great. He's okay with us loving our neighbor as ourselves because it's the golden rule, and that's what we're taught. But it's interesting, if you listen to John 13, which I encourage you to do at some point. In John 13:34, it's the Last Supper. Jesus is with all of his disciples. And keep in mind, when he was asked that first question by the religious leaders, they were trying to trick him, basically, and it was related to the law, not necessarily about what was expected in this new covenant after he sacrificed his life for us. In John 13, Jesus didn't talk about love God with all your heart. He didn't talk about love your neighbor as yourself. When he was looking at the disciples, he asked them to love others as I have loved you. And it's this interesting concept because loving your neighbor as yourself is like pretty high standard anyways, because I don't like anyone as much as I like myself. But then there's this whole other level of like, love others as I have loved you. And it's like, well, I don't like myself as much as Jesus likes me. I know that because he tells me all throughout his word. He's told me as I pray and spend time with him. It's just a whole nother level. And it's something that I think sometimes the devil's okay with us loving people as we love ourselves because it's so much less than Jesus actually loves us. And it's not actually what Jesus asked us to do after he laid his life down for us. It's something to think about. When you're at tables like this, how many times have you thought through, how can I love the guy next to me like Jesus has loved me? I never think about that. I bet half of you don't even like the guy you're sitting next to. And it's one of those things that it's like, you come into a room, that rang too true in this room. BJ's got to get like assigned seats or something. But you come into a room like this, and there's always that guy. And if there's not that guy, you are the guy. But there's that guy. You walk into a room and you're like, okay, I see them sitting over at this table. I'm going to sit way over there. And then somehow they end up walking over to you, talking to you, asking about your life. And they sit right next to you and you're like, I literally just tried to sit as far away from you as possible. If that doesn't happen to you, that's okay. But that happens to me all the time. And all the time, what I used to think was, God, what are you doing here? And I used to just lob these things up to the Lord and say, how do you get me out of this? What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. Now the question is, how do I love this person like you've loved me? And it's a slightly different perspective and a different challenge that I felt like Jesus gives me and gives all of us. He invites us into loving one another well. But so much of this has to do with, are you actually listening to him? Not so much, are you so focused on yourself? Growing up internationally, I went to church, did all this stuff. I had never heard of Tim Keller. When you move to the western suburbs of Chicago, you can't hear a sermon without somebody bringing up Tim Keller, I feel like. Like, people just bring up Tim Keller like crazy. There was something that I heard that I actually liked that he said, and I think Tim was a great guy in general, but he talked about God does not merely send someone to save us. He comes himself, and this means that he wants a personal relationship with you. Let me just read it one more time. God does not merely send someone to save us, but he sends himself, meaning he wants a personal relationship with you. And so often I think we get caught up in whatever the heck we're doing, which is awesome work stuff, it's awesome family stuff, it's awesome dad stuff, it's awesome whatever our interests are stuff. And often it's easy to say, well, I'm doing this for God. God doesn't need you at all. If he wanted to accomplish whatever you're accomplishing or you think you're accomplishing, he could do it with anyone else. There's probably a million better candidates to do exactly what you're doing all around the world. But God chose you to be in the spot you're in because he wants to love you, and he wants to actually talk with you, not just have you lob prayers his way. He wants to actually speak to you. It's something over the next week, I hope you just think a little bit about less talking to God and just being quiet and listening and just seeing maybe he'll speak to me. And I'm not going to talk to him much. I'm just going to listen. And this is in the mundane stuff. You might be driving in your car. You might be with family. You might be doing work. You might be doing whatever it is. But the question is, are you listening to God 24/7? Is it that pray without ceasing type thing? Obviously, it's hard to talk all the time. So praying without ceasing, I don't think is just talking to God 24/7. I do think it's listening to him 24/7 and being open to what is he going to do at our table? What is he going to do when we leave here? What's he going to do at work? What does he want me to do today? I'll just leave us with this. If Jesus can actually talk to you, the question is, are you listening? I wrote down, and this is kind of what I was thinking in the car on the drive over. He's calling you to love him and to love others just as he loved you. Don't settle for that phone call faith that many of us teach our kids, that many of us actually live with, where it's, dear God, thanks for this. Dear God, help me here. Dear God, give us wisdom. Amen, and hang up. Keep an open conversation throughout your day. Ask him to speak to you. And what I've seen, at least in my life, is that he actually does start speaking. Once you start those deep listening conversations with Jesus, those that deepen every day, you will learn to hear his voice, and you'll have a lot less of those times where you don't know what he's saying. Over time, he's faithful, he's true, and you will learn to hear his voice. So I'll leave you with that. There's some questions on the table that hopefully are related, but that is what I got.
Chris,